Truck drivers. What's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? Not a truck driver, but once I was driving through the Canadian Rockies late at night and had just passed through a small town. So I'm driving through the pitch black and I need to stop to pee and have a smoke. But because it's so dark I miss the last rest stop for the next while. No problem. The highway is completely deserted. So I pull to the side of the road, have my pee while staring out into the dark, and then light up a cigarette and stand by my car. As I'm standing there I see the figure of a man just walking out of the tree line. I'm miles from civilization. Patchy cell service. And there isn't a soul on the road. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me and maybe it was a deer, but nope, this was a man. So I calmly walk back to the driver's door and get in, locking the doors behind me. I'm keeping my eye on this guy as I nervously smoke and have my car in drive, ready to peel out. But for some reason I just stayed put. The guy walks right up to my passenger door and knocks on the window. I crack the window and I ask what's up. He replies to me in a very serious tone, I need you to call the cops. I cautiously ask why and he tells me he had gone out into the woods to kill himself, but he couldn't go through with it because he had thought of his daughters right before he was about to do it. I call the cops while the guy quietly cries outside. He had a kitchen knife that he was gonna use on himself, so I stayed in the car and advised him to maybe leave the knife on the ground before the cops arrived. The cops came and got him, but before they left with him I gave him a solid heart-to-heart and wished him well. I still think about him. I hope he was able to turn things around. Not sure if this story is creepy, but it's definitely scary. My father was a truck driver in East Africa in the 80s and early 90s. During the years leading up to the Rwandan genocide, my father was passing through Rwanda. He reached a checkpoint and was forcibly removed from his truck at gunpoint. Apparently he looked like he belonged to the Tutsi tribe and they put him in a cage with other Tutsi prisoners. He tried communicating that he isn't Rwandan, but no one spoke the same language as him. Every night they would take about 5 people from the cage and slaughter them in front of him. After the third night, he saw a man that spoke a little bit of Swahili, which my dad spoke, and told him that he's not Rwandan and showed him his ID. Somehow that guy got him out and he was handed the keys to his truck and was on his way. Parked off an exit ramp at about 3 a.m. for my 10-hour. The moon was full and high, and I spotted an unmistakably human figure in a nearby cut cornfield. A little spooky, but I just wrote it off as an old-timer putting up a scarecrow for the grandkids. Started watching a few YouTube videos before turning in and out the corner of my vision though I saw movement. I shut my lights off to get a good look. Saw the figure but nothing else. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like maybe it was in a different spot. Maybe a little closer even. I was definitely feeling a bit spooked. Highway was devoid of anyone besides a car passing every 10 minutes or so. I didn't want to, but I had to jump out to pee. I considered a bottle, but I told myself I was being childish. I took a look at the figure and it was right where I figured it should be. I hop out, walk between my truck and trailer and start leaking. Every fiber of my being wanted to look. I told myself again I was being foolish, but I couldn't help it. I looked out. The field was empty, the figure wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I pinched off and jumped back in. I took off down the highway. Didn't give one speep about a violation. Stopped 40 minutes up the road at a well-lit and very full Love's. Haven't stopped on a ramp since. Driving through an abandoned section of Baltimore at 3 in the morning. My CB radio turned itself on and crackled for a bit. Out of nowhere some voice over the radio said in a deep southern drawl, "I ain't got no panties on." I could see up and down the interstate for miles and saw not one set of headlights. Driving through rural NM. Misty area with the crazy melted rock look. No plants or anything. Just rock and sand. Monsoon time. Raining cats and dogs just pouring so hard you could barely see going 20 miles per hour. Thunder and lightning just rocking the car. Sometimes turning into hail and pounding you. Just a nasty storm. Came around a corner. And the whole countryside legit on fire. Like 20 tall flames. Hundreds of yards in all directions while pouring rain at dusk. Just rocks and dirt wildly on fire in the pouring rain. Just slowly drove on. Was totally freaky and surreal. Honestly thought I may have hallucinated it. Check the news. A propane truck slid off the road going way too fast and apparently busted open pretty violently and lit on fire. Never saw the truck. Must have been behind something. Felt a bit bad after about not stopping. Driving through a national park in the middle of the night going through a slow stretch at about 30 kilometers per hour. Every so often I think I see something out the window and beside me. Just a glimpse of movement. When I look though I don't catch it. Finally on about the third time I whip my head around and this time I recognize it's a huge black wolf following alongside my truck just off the highway. I only saw it for a few seconds before I had to focus back on the road, but it was absolutely lovely yet unsettling. I used to work as a road train driver in the Gascoyne region of outback Western Australia. A lot of black dog phenomena on night shift. I would see all kinds of things appear in the shadows because of fatigue. Or 3 goats would change into some sort of beast. One time I swear I nearly ran over a corgi, which would be astronomical odds there is one in the wild in this part of the outback. One night I pulled up to sleep, let the engine run cold for 10 minutes, then tried to sleep. I woke up to noises. Not voices but some sort of order to the noises, and the whole cab of the truck was shaking. I looked in the mirror and saw shadows around the vehicle. I turned the truck on and every single light attached to the thing and hastily continued my run to the port. This is a big cab, would have taken a lot to move it. I rationalize it as it being windy. Some goats around the truck and fatigue. Either way scared the beep out of me and I never slept on night shift again. Years ago I read an answer on a thread with this question. About a guy who was riding with his truck driver father as a child. They were in the middle of nowhere and they were coming up on a person laying in the road with no one else around. No cars, etc. His dad blew the horn. They didn't move. He blew it again as he got closer. They didn't move. He told his son to put his head down and cover his eyes and he ran the person over. When they looked back, a bunch of people who were previously hiding were running out of the woods, and the gist was that his dad knew it was a setup for a robbery or worse and wasn't chancing it with his child in the car. No clue if it was true or not. But I think about that story all the time. I've heard various stories like this one. The one that stood out to me the most is my aunt's friend was driving through New England and decided to take a lesser taken road. It was close to sunset and he's going through these woods like you would any road. He comes around this one bend in the road and sees this car just stopped in the road. Kind of off to the side with the horn blaring. There was someone passed out on the steering wheel. He wanted to stop and help. But something just kept tingling up his spine. He slowed to get next to the car, but something inside him made him book it. In his rear view mirror, he saw a large group of people are staring at his car as he drove away. Including the guy that was at wheel. The obligatory not a truck driver but a second-hand story I heard. My great-uncle drove big trucks. Living in the middle of nowhere, sometimes people would leave trash on the road. And since he had a big truck, he'd just smash into said boxes or paper and continue on. One day he was coming up on a cardboard box and just had the urge to swerve and miss this one. He misses it and passes by with no incident. Looks in his rear view to look at the box and out pops a kindergarten-age little kid. That just heads back to their house as nothing happened. Not exactly creepy but definitely terrifying. My father was a truck driver and he was driving through a smaller town in Northern California hauling tomatoes. Suddenly he got incredibly tired. Wasn't low on sleep or deprived at all but ended up passing out at the wheel. Last thing he saw was the light of the town in front of him. He woke up about 2 hours later on the other side of town. Perfectly parked on the side of the road. He swears something was looking out for him that night. Beep. Man, I can relate to this. I used to work some overnight shifts sometimes when I was working as a switchman for a Class 1 railroad. There was one morning after a particularly long shift where I swear I pulled over to get a quick nap in a parking lot. But woke up in my driveway. Garage door opened. Probably 2 hours before my next projected call time. That's like 7 hours of sleep. No beeping clue how I traveled the 30 miles or so to get home and can't recall it whatsoever. To this day. I'm so thankful that I didn't kill anyone or myself somehow.